The greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappeared. My daughter-in-law said it while adjusting her dress in the hallway mirror. Her voice was light, casual, like ordering coffee. My son stood 3 feet away. Daniel looked at the floor. That silence cut deeper than her smile. I didn't argue. I picked up my coat and made one call to Priya. Their dream house, built with my money, now had no room for its maker. That gift they brag about? Not a gift. A documented loan. My name on the deed. The $15,800 reception they were counting on? About to be cancelled. They wanted me gone from their family. Fine. I disappeared from their budget. And this time, I wasn't coming back. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. I was 68 years old. A widow. A retired librarian who'd spent 40 years helping strangers find answers. Now I stood in a kitchen I'd helped buy. They wanted me gone. 3 years earlier, everything looked different. Wade had just died. The Victorian house felt too big. Every creak reminded me he wasn't coming back. Daniel called on a Tuesday. His voice carried that careful tone adult children use when they need something. He and Lila had found their dream house. The market was tight. They were short on the down payment. Could I help? I sold the Victorian within 6 weeks. The closing happened on a gray morning in November. I signed papers in an office that smelled like burnt coffee. $92,000 went into their escrow account. Daniel hugged me at the title company. Lila squeezed my hand and called me generous. I told myself this was what mothers did. Investment in family. Security for my son. The guest room would be mine whenever I visited. I moved into a small rental apartment near the library. 1 bedroom. A kitchen window that faced a brick wall. Temporary, I thought. Just until I figured out what came next. The invitations arrived 8 months ago. Cream cardstock. Embossed lettering. A wedding date circled in gold. Lila wanted a celebration. Daniel wanted Lila happy. They sat me down one Sunday. The coffee table held budget spreadsheets and venue photos. $15,000 for the reception at Lakeside Country Club. 200 guests. Past hors d'oeuvres. Open bar. A 12-piece band. Ice sculptures shaped like swans. Lila's eyes glowed when she described the vision. Daniel's forehead creased when he looked at the numbers. They didn't ask directly. They just kept showing me pictures. Mentioning how much it meant. How tight money was. How grateful they'd be. I said yes. Because that's what I did. The credit card went on the table. My signature went on the contract. $15,800. For one night. I told myself it was their special day. Just this once. But it wasn't once. The utilities needed covering 1 month. Their furnace died in January. Lila's car developed a mysterious rattle that required $1,800. Emergency after emergency. Each time I wrote the check, Daniel promised it was temporary. Each time Lila hugged me and said I was saving them, I kept a small notebook. Old librarian habit. Every payment, every date, every amount. The numbers added up in blue ink. $39,000 over 3 years. Not counting the down payment. Not counting interest I wasn't charging. I never mentioned the notebook. I told myself families helped each other. This was love. But love started feeling like a bill I kept paying. The house changed around me. New furniture appeared. Leather couch. Marble countertops. A wine fridge Lila called essential. My guest room became storage. Then a home gym. Then Lila's walk-in closet expansion. My visits grew shorter. The spare key I'd been given didn't work after they changed the locks. For security, Daniel explained. He'd get me a new one. He never did. Last Tuesday, I stopped by unannounced. Lila was planning centerpieces at the dining table. White roses in crystal vases. She looked up like I'd interrupted something important. Did I need something? I said I was just visiting. She glanced at her phone. Smiled that tight smile. They were busy with wedding prep. Maybe I could call first next time? Daniel walked in from the garage. He kissed my cheek but didn't sit down. Work was crazy. They had vendor meetings all week. I stood in the entryway for maybe 2 minutes. Then I left. Thursday, I tried calling. Voicemail. Friday, same thing. Saturday morning, I drove over with banana bread. Wade's recipe. Daniel's favorite since he was 7. I knocked. Lila opened the door in yoga clothes. She didn't invite me in. The bread was sweet, she said, but they were doing keto now. Maybe I could take it to my book club? She closed the door while I was still on the porch. I sat in my car for 10 minutes. The banana bread cooled in my lap. I thought about Wade. How he'd squeeze my hand during hard conversations. How he'd say that enabling isn't kindness. I drove home. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment walls felt thin. I made tea and opened the notebook. 3 years of numbers stared back. 39,000 in casual rescues. 92,000 in down payment. For what? A guest room I couldn't access? A family who screened my calls? Sunday afternoon, they finally called. They needed me at the house. Important wedding discussion. I arrived at 4. Lila met me at the door in that dress. Ivory silk. Fitted perfectly. She was showing it to Daniel. I said hello. She glanced over. Smiled. Evelyn. Perfect timing. She never called me mom. Not once in 3 years. We moved to the kitchen. Daniel poured water. His hands were shaking slightly. They'd been talking, Lila said. About the wedding. About stress. About family dynamics. Her voice was gentle. Therapeutic. Like she'd rehearsed. They loved me. They appreciated everything. But that word hung in the air. They'd realized something important. The wedding was about starting their new chapter. Fresh. Clean. Uncluttered. She used that word. Uncluttered. My presence might bring complicated energy. She'd been reading about boundaries. About protecting your space. About choosing who witnesses your sacred moments. Daniel studied the floor. His jaw was tight. Lila's voice stayed soft. The greatest gift for our wedding would be if you disappeared from our family. She said it while touching her hair. Like commenting on the weather. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. My chest felt hollow. I looked at my son. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. I heard myself say okay. My voice sounded far away. I'd stay home. No problem. Lila's shoulders relaxed. She called me understanding. Mature. She air-kissed near my cheek and left to take a call. Daniel finally looked up. Mom. I raised my hand. I didn't want explanations. I walked to the guest room. My old room. Now stacked with storage bins and Lila's off-season wardrobe. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Then I left. Daniel didn't follow me out. I sat in my car. The sun was setting behind their house. Their dream house. Built on my $92,000. I pulled out my phone. Priya Patel answered on the second ring. She'd been Wade's attorney first. Then mine. 2 years ago, when I'd mentioned concerns about Lila's spending, Priya had insisted on documentation. Every payment, every loan, every property detail. I'd thought she was being paranoid. Now her voice was steady in my ear. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" I told her, not crying, just facts. She listened. Then she said 7 words that changed everything. That gift was never actually a gift. We'd documented it. Paperwork. Clear terms. It was a loan. I was on the mortgage. I was on the deed. I owned 35% of their dream house. Something shifted in my chest. Not anger. Something colder. Clearer. "Priya," I said, "draft a notice of intent to sell." She paused. "You're sure?" I looked at the house. Lights glowing warm inside. My son and his wife planning their uncluttered future. "Yes," I said. "I'm done disappearing." I started the car. Wade's photo was still tucked in the visor. I touched it gently. "Watch this," I whispered. Then I drove away from the house I'd bought. Toward the life I was going to take back. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The phone started ringing at 11:42 that night. I was in a Marriott off Highway 101. Room 347. The bed was too firm. The heating unit clicked every few minutes. But it was mine. Nobody could ask me to leave. 6 hours earlier, I'd driven straight from their driveway to this hotel. I hadn't gone back to my apartment. I needed distance. Space to think without their voices in my head. The front desk clerk was young. Maybe 25. She smiled when I asked for a single room. "How many nights?" I told her I wasn't sure yet. She handed me a key card and pointed toward the elevator. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I ordered soup from room service. Tomato bisque. Crackers on the side. It arrived in a covered bowl on a plastic tray. The soup was too hot. I ate it anyway. Then I made the second call. Lakeside Country Club had closed for the day. I got the night manager. I asked for the events coordinator's direct line. She answered on the 4th ring. Her voice was professional, slightly tired. I gave her the reservation number. The date. My name as the signer. I told her I needed to cancel tomorrow's reception. Tomorrow? Yes. Tomorrow. There was a long pause. She asked if I understood the cancellation penalties. I said yes. $15,800. I'd accepted that when I signed. Most of it non-refundable. 72 hours was the cutoff. I was past the deadline. I knew. She asked if I was sure. The reception was in 18 hours. 200 confirmed guests. The catering was already in prep. I told her I was completely sure. "Please process the cancellation." Another pause. Then keyboard clicking. She asked for verbal confirmation one more time. I gave it. The line went quiet while she entered notes. Finally, she said it was done. She sounded almost sad when she wished me well. I thanked her. Then I sat in the Marriott chair and waited. The call came at 11:42. Daniel. His voice was raw, barely controlled. I'd cancelled their wedding. How could I? What was I thinking? I let him finish. The silence stretched between us. Then I corrected him quietly. I hadn't cancelled their wedding. They could still marry at the courthouse. At a church. In their backyard. I'd cancelled the party. The $15,000 party I was funding. The party for people who wanted me to disappear. His breath caught. Lila was shouting in the background. She grabbed the phone. Her voice wobbled between fury and panic. 200 guests had flights. Hotel rooms. Arrangements. The band was contracted. The flowers were ordered. How could I do this? I asked if she remembered what she'd said in the kitchen. The line went quiet. I told her I was done bankrolling people who wished I'd vanish. She started to speak. I talked over her. For 3 years, I'd been writing checks. Utilities when they forgot to pay. Car repairs that were always emergencies. Grocery money slipped across produce bins when they ran short. 3 years of rescues they never acknowledged. $39,000. Not counting the down payment. Not counting interest I didn't charge. Lila's voice changed. Became smaller. That was different, she said. That was family. I asked how it was different. She didn't answer. Daniel took the phone back. His voice was pleading now. We could talk about this. Work it out. The wedding was tomorrow. I told him talking time was over. I'd already spoken to Priya. He went silent. I explained it simply. I was a co-owner of their house. 35%. I had legal right to force a sale. Unless they bought me out. Market value. His voice cracked. That would ruin them. I said no. I was ending a pattern. They'd been ruining themselves just fine. I hung up. The phone started ringing again immediately. I turned off the ringer. Lay down on the hotel bed. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a kidney bean. I stared at it for a long time. My chest felt tight. But not from regret. From something releasing. Like a knot finally loosening. By morning, I had 30 missed calls. 17 from Daniel. 9 from Lila. 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably wedding party members. Maybe Lila's mother. I deleted the voicemails without listening. Showered. Ordered coffee from the lobby. At 9:15, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole. Daniel. His eyes were red. His shirt was wrinkled. He looked like he hadn't slept. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. He asked if we could talk. Please. I stepped into the hallway. Let the door close behind me. We stood by the ice machine. The hallway smelled like chlorine from the pool downstairs. Daniel's voice was hoarse. He needed me to be reasonable. Undo this. They'd work out the other stuff. But the wedding was today. Guests were arriving. I asked what reasonable looked like. He stammered. Fund the reception. Walk it back. They'd pay me eventually. They just needed time. I told him time had run out 3 years ago. His face hardened. I was ruining their lives. Being vindictive. Acting crazy. I felt that word land. Crazy. I asked if he'd said the same thing to Lila yesterday. When she told me to disappear. Was she crazy? Or just honest? He looked away. I laid out the situation. Simple math. They could buy out my 35% at current market value. The house appraised at $370,000 last year. My share was $129,000. Minus the $92,000 I'd put in. They owed me $37,000. Plus the $39,000 in loans. $76,000 total. Or they could refuse. And I'd file to force the sale. The house would go on the market. They'd lose everything. Daniel's face went pale. They didn't have $76,000. I told him that wasn't my problem. He could get a loan. Borrow from Lila's family. Sell things. Figure it out. The way I'd figured it out when I sold my house. When I wrote all those checks. When I made myself small so they could feel big. His jaw clenched. This was blackmail. I corrected him. This was accounting. I went back into my room. Closed the door. Sat on the bed. My hands were shaking now. But I didn't cry. I called Priya. She answered immediately. I told her about the morning. About Daniel's visit. About the word crazy. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I needed to hear. They were going to escalate. People who lose power always do. I should expect pushback. Maybe legal threats. Maybe worse. I asked what worse meant. She said some families tried competency challenges. Claimed the elder was confused. Not thinking clearly. Needed protection. From themselves. My stomach dropped. Could they do that? Priya's voice was firm. They could try. But I had documentation. Clear mind. Clear records. I'd just executed a complex financial decision. Cancelled a contract. Asserted my property rights. No confused person does that. Still, I should be prepared. I thanked her. Asked when the notice of intent would go out. She said Monday. Certified mail. Legal and binding. I had the weekend to brace for impact. I spent Saturday in the hotel room. Ordered meals. Watched television without watching. My phone buzzed constantly. I didn't answer. Sunday morning, I went to the hotel restaurant. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Coffee that tasted like cardboard. A family sat 2 tables over. Young parents. 2 kids in church clothes. The mother was cutting pancakes into small pieces. The father was wiping syrup off tiny hands. They looked tired, but connected. I wondered if I'd looked like that once. When Daniel was small. Before Wade died. Before everything got complicated. The mother glanced over. Smiled politely. I smiled back. Then I finished my coffee. Went back to room 347. Lay on the 2-firm bed. And waited for Monday. For the notice that would change everything. For the fallout I knew was coming. But also for something else. The strange, terrifying freedom of choosing myself. Of saying no. Of mattering. Even if it cost me everything. Especially then. The heating unit clicked. Outside, traffic hummed on the highway. I closed my eyes. Wade's voice drifted through my memory. Boundaries aren't walls, Evie. They're doors. You choose who gets a key. I'd been handing out keys to people who kept changing locks. Not anymore. Monday would come. The notice would land. The battle would begin. But for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't disappearing. I was standing exactly where I needed to be. In a Marriott off Highway 101. Room 347. Finally visible. Finally heard. Finally done. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The police arrived on Tuesday afternoon. 2 officers. One older. One barely past academy age by the look of him. They asked if I was Evelyn Brooks. I said yes. They said they needed to verify my well-being. A welfare check. Someone had expressed concerns. I knew immediately who'd called. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. The older one, Sergeant Alvarez, had kind eyes. The kind that had seen too much but still cared. He asked if we could talk inside. I invited them into my apartment. The small 1-bedroom I'd rented 3 years ago. Temporary, I'd told myself then. Still here now. The furniture was minimal. A couch. A table. Wade's reading chair by the window. Everything clean. Organized. Like a librarian's home should be. Alvarez looked around slowly. Taking inventory. His partner stood by the door. Hand near his radio. Like I might bolt. Or collapse. Alvarez asked if I was feeling all right. Any confusion lately? Memory problems? I asked who'd made the report. He said he couldn't disclose that. But concerns had been raised about my decision-making. About my mental state. The words landed exactly as they were meant to. My son had called me crazy on Sunday. Now he was making it official. I excused myself. Went to the bedroom closet. Pulled down a cardboard file box. Wade had taught me to keep records. Every receipt, every statement, every document. 40 years of marriage to an accountant left habits. I brought the box to the dining table. Opened it in front of Alvarez. His partner moved closer. I pulled out bank statements first. 3 years of them, highlighted in yellow. Every transfer to Daniel and Lila. Dates, amounts, purposes when noted. Alvarez put on reading glasses. Started going through them. His expression didn't change, but he took his time. Next, I showed him the property deed. My name, clear as daylight, Evelyn Brooks, 35% owner. Then the mortgage documents, co-signer, co-borrower, everything legal, everything recorded. The younger officer was looking at his phone, probably checking records. I pulled out my phone, opened my voicemail, found the one from yesterday. 3:17 in the morning. Lila's voice, sweet as poisoned honey. Talking about my decline, how worried they were, how I wasn't thinking clearly, how they just wanted to help. I played it on speaker. The apartment filled with her concerned tone. The performance of care. Alvarez listened all the way through. Then asked to hear it again. I replayed it. When it finished, silence settled heavy. The younger officer cleared his throat. Alvarez removed his glasses, folded them carefully, put them in his shirt pocket. He told me I was clearly competent. Sharp, actually. The welfare check was complete. But he had advice. Off the record, I should document everything going forward. Keep a log. Save messages. Note interactions. Because this wouldn't be the last attempt. People don't like losing control. Especially over money. He'd seen this pattern before. Adult children convinced their aging parents were incompetent, when really, the parent was just setting boundaries. He said it happens more than people think. Financial abuse disguised as concern. His partner nodded, looking younger and more tired than before. I thanked them, walked them to the door. Alvarez paused in the hallway. Said his mother had been in a similar situation. She'd backed down, regretted it until she died. He was glad I wasn't backing down. The door closed. I stood in the sudden quiet. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me again. I should have felt violated. Or scared. Instead, I felt clarified. They'd shown their strategy. Now I knew what I was dealing with. I made tea. Earl Grey. Wade's favorite. The smell filled the small kitchen. Steam curled up from the cup. Outside, a bus hissed to a stop. Someone's dog barked 3 times then stopped. Normal afternoon sounds. The world continuing, while mine was shifting underneath. My phone buzzed. Priya. She'd heard about the welfare check. Somehow news traveled fast in legal circles. Or maybe Alvarez had made a call. She wanted to meet. Today if possible. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near her office. Neutral ground. Public. I arrived first. Chose a table by the window. Ordered black coffee I didn't want. Priya arrived 10 minutes later. Professional. Pressed suit. Leather briefcase. But her face was concerned. She sat down without ordering. Leaned forward. Asked if I was okay. Really okay. I told her about the police visit. The documents I'd shown. The voicemail I'd played. Alvarez's advice. She listened without interrupting. Then she laid out what would happen next. Daniel and Lila would likely lawyer up. They'd look for angles. Competency challenges were hard to win if I was clearly functional. But they could make noise. Drag things out. Make it expensive. Emotionally costly. She asked if I wanted to proceed full force, or if I wanted to negotiate something smaller. Take less. Settle quietly. Make it go away. The coffee shop was busy. Someone's laptop played music too loud. A barista called out complicated drink orders. Caramel macchiato with oat milk. Triple shot Americano. Names that weren't really names. I watched people living their regular Tuesday, not knowing their worlds could flip. That family could become strangers. That love could have price tags. I looked back at Priya. Told her I wanted to proceed full force, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because backing down now meant disappearing forever. She nodded, said she'd file the formal notice of intent to sell. They'd have 30 days to respond. Buy me out or prepare for the house to list. She'd also draft a cease and harassment letter. Document the welfare check attempt. The threatening voicemails. Build a protective wall of paper. We finished our coffee. Well, she finished hers. Mine had gone cold. As we stood to leave, someone touched my shoulder. I turned. Caroline Mercer, Lila's mother. I'd met her twice before. Once at their housewarming. Once at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. She was 60-something, well-dressed, careful hair, the kind of woman who scheduled her life in 30-minute blocks. She asked if we could talk. Just a few minutes. Priya looked at me. I nodded. She squeezed my hand and left. Caroline and I sat back down. She ordered nothing, just folded her hands on the table. Looked at them instead of me. Then she said thank you. The words seemed to surprise her as much as me. I asked what for. She looked up. Her eyes were tired in a way makeup couldn't hide. She said for showing her daughter who she'd become. For not enabling her, the way Caroline had been doing for 39 years. She talked for 15 minutes. About lawyers she'd hired for Lila's college mistakes. Credit cards she'd paid off 6 times. Consequences she'd smoothed away. Reality she'd rewritten so Lila never had to face it. She'd thought she was being a good mother, protecting her daughter, but she'd created someone who expected rescue, who threw tantrums when the world said no, who thought other people's money was hers to spend. Caroline had seen the wedding plans, the budget that made no sense. She'd almost offered to pay when I canceled. Habit, instinct, the same pattern she'd been running for decades. But something stopped her. Maybe exhaustion, maybe clarity. She told me she wouldn't rescue them this time. If I forced the sale, she'd let it happen. Lila needed to learn, even if the lesson was brutal. I asked if she thought I was being cruel. She shook her head, said cruelty was letting someone stay broken. Kindness was letting them heal. Even when healing hurt. We sat quietly for a moment. The coffee shop noise swirled around us. Finally, Caroline stood. Said she'd tell Lila not to contact me. She couldn't promise it would work. But she'd try. She left her business card on the table. In case I needed anything. Then she walked out into the Tuesday afternoon. I sat alone at the window table, watching people pass on the sidewalk. Everyone carrying their private wars. Their small rebellions. Their invisible boundaries. I picked up Caroline's card. Mercer Consulting. Project management. A woman who'd built a career on organization. While her personal life stayed chaotic. I understood that. Librarians knew about order in the public spaces. And mess in the private ones. I walked home slowly. The afternoon was cooling. October settling into Northern California. Not cold, just sharper. Back in my apartment, I made soup. Vegetable. From a can. Not fancy. Just fuel. I ate standing at the counter. Then I did what Alvarez suggested. Started a log. Date, time, interaction, a timeline of what was happening. And what would come next. Because this wasn't over. It was barely starting. But I had documentation. I had Priya. I had Alvarez's warning and Caroline's unexpected alliance. And I had myself. 68 years old. Widowed. Dismissed. Underestimated. But done disappearing. The soup pot soaked in the sink. Wade's chair sat empty by the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. One by one. Small circles of brightness pushing back the dark. I sat in Wade's chair. Let the evening settle. And waited for whatever came next. Ready. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. They signed on a Thursday afternoon in November. 3 weeks after the wedding that never happened. The conference room smelled like furniture polish and desperation. Daniel's signature shook on the page. Lila's was sharp. Angry. Pressed so hard the pen nearly tore through. But they signed. That morning had started differently. Priya's office was all dark wood and quiet clocks. The kind of place where serious things happened. Where lives changed on paper. I arrived 15 minutes early. Sat in the waiting area with its leather chairs and year-old magazines. My hands were folded in my lap. Still, calm. Inside, my heart was hammering. Daniel and Lila arrived 12 minutes late. I heard them before I saw them. Lila's voice sharp in the hallway. Hissing something about lawyers and theft. Daniel's voice low. Tired. Trying to quiet her. They came through the glass doors looking like they'd aged years. Daniel's shirt was wrinkled. His face unshaven. Lila wore sunglasses inside. Designer ones. Her armor. Neither looked at me. Priya emerged from her office. Gestured us all inside. Professional. Neutral. Like a referee entering a ring. The conference table was long. Polished. I sat on one side. They sat on the other. Priya took the head. Laid out 3 folders. One for each of us. She started with the facts. Simple. Clean. Indisputable. I owned 35% of the property at 2847 Maple Ridge Drive. Current appraisal, $372,000. My share, $130,200. Minus my initial investment, $92,000. Net owed from equity, $38,200. Plus documented loans over 3 years, $39,300. Total buyout figure, $77,500. The numbers hung in the air. Lila shifted in her chair. The leather squeaked. Daniel stared at the folder unopened. Priya continued. They had 3 options. Buy me out at that figure. Or I could force a sale of the property. Or they could propose alternative terms I might accept. Lila leaned forward. Her voice dripped with controlled venom. She said this was extortion. Financial abuse of a vulnerable elder. Her lawyer had said they had grounds. Priya didn't blink. Asked what lawyer. Lila named someone I'd never heard of. Priya made a note. Asked if that lawyer had reviewed the deed. The mortgage documents. The bank transfers. The voicemail Lila left at 3 in the morning. The welfare check they'd initiated. Lila's jaw clenched. Priya slid a document across the table. A timeline. Every interaction since the wedding cancellation. Dated. Documented. Witnessed where applicable. She suggested Lila share it with her lawyer. Before they discussed abuse claims. The room went quiet. Outside, a car alarm chirped twice then stopped. Daniel finally spoke. His voice was hollow. Asked if we could see their budget. Priya nodded, opened the second folder. Daniel slid a stack of papers across. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan balances. Priya went through them slowly. I watched her face stay neutral. But her pen moved faster. Underlining, circling, making notes in margins. After 10 minutes, she looked up. The numbers told a story. Restaurants, 1,800 monthly average. Subscriptions, Netflix, Hulu, premium gym, meal kits, audiobooks, meditation app. 400 monthly. Car payments, $750 for Lila's Subaru, $520 for Daniel's Honda. Credit cards, 3 maxed. Minimum payments only. Total debt, $47,000. Not counting the mortgage. Their income was decent. Daniel's IT salary, Lila's part-time blogging income. But outflow exceeded income by $2,000 monthly. Every month. For years, they'd been drowning in slow motion. My money had been the bucket keeping them afloat. Priya asked about home equity loans. Daniel said they'd tried, denied, too much existing debt. Asked about family help. Daniel glanced at Lila. She looked away. Her mother had said no. That much was clear. Priya folded her hands. Said they couldn't afford the buyout. Not as structured, which meant forced sale was the likely outcome. They'd lose the house, lose everything, start over with damaged credit. Lila made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite anger, something raw underneath the designer sunglasses. Daniel put his head in his hands. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, measuring out their collapse. I should have felt victorious. Or at least justified. Instead, I felt tired. And something unexpected. Sad. Not for me. For what they'd wasted. For who they'd become. I heard my voice speaking. Calm. Clear. Like someone else was using my mouth. I said there was another option. Everyone looked at me. I told them I'd reduce the buyout. $78,000 instead of $77,500. Well below market value for my share. But there were conditions. Non-negotiable ones. Lila started to speak. I raised my hand. She stopped. First condition, Lila gets full-time employment within 60 days. Keeps it for minimum 2 years. Documented. Verifiable. Second, they sell the Subaru immediately. Use the money to pay down credit card debt. Third, no new debt of any kind. No credit cards. No loans. No financing. Fourth, they cancel all non-essential subscriptions. Keep basic internet and one streaming service. Fifth, restaurant spending capped at $200 monthly. They cook at home. Sixth, monthly financial check-ins with Priya. Full transparency. For 2 years. Seventh, they pay me in installments. $5,000 upfront. Rest over 18 months. Eighth and final, if they break any condition, full balance becomes immediately due. The room was completely silent. Even the clock seemed to pause. Lila removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were red. Makeup smudged. She said it was financial prison. I corrected her quietly. Said it was adulthood. It was what Wade and I had lived for 40 years. Budgets. Discipline. Saying no to ourselves. So we could say yes to what mattered. Daniel looked at the numbers again. Did math in his head. Asked if I'd really force the sale. I said yes. Without hesitation. My life couldn't keep subsidizing theirs. He nodded slowly, like something was settling in his mind. Lila stood abruptly. Said she needed air. Left the conference room. Her heels clicked down the hallway. Fading. Daniel stayed. Stared at the papers. Priya asked if he wanted time to discuss privately. He said yes. I went to the waiting area. Sat in the same leather chair. The magazines were still a year old. Time moved differently in lawyers' offices. Through the glass wall, I could see them. Daniel standing, pacing, Lila gesturing, sharp movements. Priya sitting still, letting them fight it out. 20 minutes passed. A receptionist offered me water. I accepted, drank it slowly. The cold helped. Finally, the conference room door opened. Priya gestured me back. Daniel and Lila sat again. Closer together this time. United in defeat. Or maybe in surrender. Lila's voice was smaller now. Asked if there was any flexibility. On the conditions. I said no. She asked why I was doing this. I told her the truth. Because 3 years ago, I'd invested in family. Now I was investing in their survival. Even if they hated me for it. Daniel asked when they'd need to start. Priya said immediately. She'd draft the agreement. They'd sign today. Payment plan would begin within 30 days. First check-in in 6 weeks. She asked if they agreed. Lila looked at Daniel. Daniel looked at his hands. Then at me. Something passed across his face. Recognition maybe. Or resignation. He said yes. Lila said yes. Their voices barely above whispers. Priya pulled out the contracts. Walked through each page. Each clause. Each consequence. She asked if they understood. They said yes. She asked if they agreed. They said yes. She pushed the signature pages forward. Daniel signed first, his hand shaking, the pen scratching across the paper. Lila signed second, pressing so hard I thought the page would tear. But it held. Priya witnessed, dated, collected the documents. It was done. The room exhaled. Daniel stood. Looked at me for the first time. Asked if I was happy now. I told him I wasn't happy. I was done. There was a difference. He nodded. Looked like he might say more. Didn't. They left together. Lila first. Daniel trailing. The glass door closed behind them. Priya and I sat in the sudden quiet. She asked if I was okay. I said yes. Surprisingly, I meant it. The contracts sat on the table between us. Ink still drying. New boundaries. Finally drawn. Finally enforced. Outside, November rain started to fall. Soft at first. Then harder. Washing everything clean. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The moving truck arrived on a Saturday in December. Not for me to leave. For me to arrive. The sign at the entrance read Riverside Meadows Senior Living Community. Cheerful. A little too cheerful. But the units had balconies and the rent included utilities. After 3 years in that dark apartment, sunlight felt like wealth. 6 weeks had passed since the signing. 6 weeks of silence from Daniel and Lila. No calls. No visits. No emergencies. The quiet felt strange at first. Then comfortable. Like a muscle finally relaxing. The first payment had cleared 3 days ago. $5,000. Right on schedule. Priya had texted me a screenshot of the deposit. Followed by a thumbs up emoji. She wasn't usually an emoji person. But she knew what this meant. They were trying. Or at least, they were complying. The movers carried my furniture up to Unit 214. Second floor. Corner unit. 2-bedroom. More space than I needed. But less than I'd had in the Victorian. The balance felt right. 1 bedroom for sleeping. 1 for Wade's books and my sewing machine. The kind of small luxury you earn by letting go. The balcony overlooked a walking path. Trees lined it. Oaks mostly. Some birch. In the distance, a pond reflected gray December sky. A man was walking a small white dog. The dog stopped every few feet to investigate smells. The man waited patiently each time. No hurry, no frustration. Just Saturday morning at a pace that matched breathing. I unpacked slowly. Dishes in the kitchen. Books on shelves. Wade's reading chair by the window where light came in. His photo on the side table. The same one I'd packed the day I left Daniel's house. Wade in his garden. Tomatoes behind him, smiling like he'd just told a joke. I touched the frame. Told him we'd made it. A knock interrupted the silence. I opened the door to a woman about my age. Round face. Bright eyes. Holding a casserole dish. She introduced herself as Margaret from 216. The casserole was tuna. She hoped I wasn't vegetarian. The dish was still warm. I invited her in. We sat at my small kitchen table. Ate tuna casserole with plastic forks because I hadn't unpacked the silverware yet. Margaret talked easily. About the community. The activities. The people to know. Book club met Tuesdays. Water aerobics Thursdays. Movie night every other Friday in the common room. She asked what brought me here. I gave the simple version. Downsizing. Fresh start. Time for something new. She nodded like she understood. Said most people here had a story. Usually involved kids or money or both. But nobody asked unless you offered. It was a good policy. After she left, I finished unpacking. Hung towels. Made the bed. Arranged books by topic the way librarians do. By evening, the apartment felt like mine. Small. Manageable. Peaceful. No one's storage space but my own. Sunday, I explored the grounds. The walking path circled the pond. Half a mile exactly. A sign said so. Other residents nodded as they passed. Some smiled. Some didn't. Everyone moved at their own speed. No judgment. No competition. Just bodies moving because movement felt good. I walked the loop twice. My knees complained a little. But not much. At the pond's edge, benches faced the water. I sat on one. Watched ducks paddle in formation. A man sat down 2 benches over. 70s maybe. Weathered face. Kind eyes. He had a paperback and a thermos. Poured coffee. Sipped. Read. Didn't look up. I liked that. The freedom to be near people without performing for them. Monday morning, I received the first bank statement. Daniel and Lila's account. Part of the agreement. Priya got them too. We'd review together at the 6-week check-in. I opened it carefully. The numbers told a story. Restaurant charges had dropped. From $1,800 to $370. Still over the 200 limit. But progress. Subscriptions were mostly gone. Netflix remained. The rest cancelled. The Subaru sale had cleared. $12,700. Applied to credit card debt. One card was paid off completely. The other 2 showed lower balances. No new charges on any of them. I stared at that detail longest. No new charges. They were actually doing it. Living within their means. Saying no to themselves. Tuesday, I went to book club. The common room was warmly lit. 14 people in a circle. Margaret waved me over. Saved me a seat. This month's book was about a woman who walked the Appalachian Trail alone. After her husband died. After her life fell apart. She rebuilt herself one step at a time. The discussion was thoughtful. People spoke about loss. About starting over. About finding yourself when everything familiar was gone. A woman named Dorothy said sometimes the trail is the only teacher left. Everyone nodded. I thought about my own trail. The one that led from a Victorian house to a dark apartment to here. To sunlight and boundaries and peace. After book club, Margaret introduced me to Gus. The man from the bench. He had the thermos again. Offered me coffee. It was terrible. Burnt and over-strong. I told him so. He laughed. Said his wife had made the coffee for 53 years. Since she died, he'd been figuring it out. Hadn't figured it out yet. We sat on the bench again. He read. I watched the ducks. Neither of us talked. It was the best conversation I'd had in months. Wednesday brought the first test. Daniel called. I almost didn't answer. But part of the agreement was staying accessible. His voice was careful. Asked how I was settling in. I said fine. He asked about the new place. I kept answers short, factual. Then he got to the point. Lila's laptop had died. She needed it for work applications. Could they maybe adjust the budget this one time? Just $800. They'd pay me back. The old pattern. Dressed in new clothes. I felt the pull. The familiar ache of wanting to rescue. To smooth things over. To be the good mother. I said no. The agreement was clear. No new debt. That included loans from me. He could check pawn shops. Buy used. Refurbished. Find a way that didn't involve borrowing. Silence stretched across the line. Then he said okay. His voice was flat. Disappointed. But he didn't argue. Didn't guilt. Just okay. We hung up. I sat on my balcony. The afternoon was cold. My hands were shaking slightly. But I'd held the line. Thursday, I tried water aerobics. The pool was heated. Smelled like chlorine and echoed with splashing. 12 women moved through exercises. Led by an instructor who was probably 50. Young compared to us. She called out movements with cheerful authority. Arm circles. Leg lifts. Gentle kicks. The water supported weight that knees and hips no longer wanted to carry. After class, we sat in the hot tub. Steam rose around us. A woman named Jean asked if I had family nearby. I said my son lived 20 minutes away. She asked if we were close. I thought about the question. About what close meant now. I said we were working on it. She nodded. Said her daughter hadn't spoken to her in 2 years. Money thing. Always money. She'd stopped chasing. Started living. Found out she didn't need her daughter's approval. Just her own. The other women murmured agreement. Stories surfaced like steam. Sons who borrowed and never paid back. Daughters who wanted inheritance before death. Grandchildren used as bargaining chips. Families that treated elders like ATMs. Or burdens. Or both. Nobody offered solutions. Just witness. The relief of being understood without explaining. Friday evening, my phone buzzed. A photo from Lila. Their kitchen table. Spaghetti in a plain bowl. No garnish. No wine. No fancy plating. Just food. The text said they'd cooked. First time in 3 weeks. Daniel had made the sauce from scratch. It was good. I stared at the photo. Something loosened in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. More like possibility. I texted back. Told them I was proud of them. 3 words. Simple. True. Saturday morning, I walked the pond loop 3 times. My knees felt stronger. Or maybe I felt stronger. Hard to tell the difference. Gus was at the bench. Thermos. Paperback. Same routine. I sat down. Asked what he was reading. He showed me. Mystery novel. Detective in Maine. Solving murders while drinking whiskey. I asked if it was good. He said it passed the time. Then asked if I wanted to go to movie night next Friday. They were showing something old. Black and white. Probably terrible. But the popcorn was free. I said maybe. He smiled. Said maybe was better than no. We sat in comfortable silence. The ducks paddled. The water rippled. December sun filtered through bare branches. Everything was smaller now. My space. My budget. My obligations. But somehow, life felt bigger. Room to breathe. Room to choose. Room to be more than someone's emergency fund. That night, I pulled out Wade's photo again. Told him about the apartment. About Gus and Margaret and book club. About Daniel's call and my no. About Lila's spaghetti photo. About finding myself in a place I'd never planned to be. Discovering it fit better than anything I'd forced. The frame reflected lamplight. Wade's smile looked knowing. Like he'd seen this coming. Like he'd been waiting for me to catch up. Outside, the pond was dark. But lights from other units glowed warm. People living their quiet, complicated lives. Earning their peace. One boundary at a time. I turned off the lamp. Went to bed in my own space. In my own time. Belonging finally to myself. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The request came in February. 4 months into the agreement. 4 months of steady payments and careful compliance. Then Lila called asking for an exception. Small, she said. Reasonable. Just this once. My finger hovered over the red button. Almost declined. But I'd promised accessibility. So I answered. Her voice was different than before. Quieter. Less entitled. But the ask was the same old song. She'd been doing so well. Following every rule. Making every payment. Working full-time now at a dental office. Real job. Real hours. Real paycheck. She was proud of that. I could hear it. But, that word again. She'd sold her designer handbag collection to meet the terms. 6 bags. $2,000 total. Applied to debt like she was supposed to. Now one of her co-workers was getting married. Nice wedding. Destination thing. Lila wanted to buy a gift. And maybe a new bag for the occasion. Nothing crazy. Just $500. She'd pay me back. Promise. The heating unit in my apartment clicked on. Warm air whispered through the vents. Outside, February rain tapped against the window. Steady. Persistent. I asked if she remembered the agreement. Her voice shifted. Defensive. Said this was different. It wasn't debt. Just a small purchase. An investment in her professional relationships. I asked how a handbag was professional investment. Silence. Then she tried another angle. She'd been so good. Hadn't broken a single rule. Didn't she deserve something? Some reward for all this discipline? The rain picked up, drumming harder against glass. I told her no, absolutely not. The agreement was clear. No luxury spending, no exceptions. She could attend the wedding. Buy a gift within their budget. Use the canvas tote she already owned. Her voice went sharp. Asked if I was serious. Show up with a ratty old bag? In front of colleagues? I said yes. Completely serious. Bags didn't define worth. Character did. She made a sound. Half laugh. Half disbelief. Said I was being unreasonable. Punishing her. Making her look poor. I reminded her she was poor. $47,000 in debt 4 months ago. Still $31,000 in the hole. She wasn't shopping for handbags. She was digging out of a pit. The line went quiet. Just breathing and rain sounds. Then she hung up. No goodbye. No acknowledgement. Just dial tone. I sat in Wade's chair. Stared at the rain-blurred window. Waited for the guilt to arrive. It didn't come. Instead, something else settled. Certainty. That afternoon, I went to the community garden. Small plot behind the main building. Raised beds for residents who wanted to grow things. I'd signed up in January. Planted winter vegetables. Kale. Chard. Snap peas climbing a trellis. The rain had stopped. Ground was soft. Dark. Rich. I pulled a few weeds. Checked the peas for new growth. Tiny tendrils reaching upward. Gus appeared at the next plot. He grew tomatoes exclusively. Had 30 different seedlings started in his apartment. Waiting for last frost. He asked if I was okay. I must have looked stressed. I told him about Lila's call. About the handbag request. About saying no. He nodded slowly. Pulled a weed. Flicked it into the compost bin. Said his daughter used to call with emergencies. Always needed money. Always had reasons. He'd stopped answering a decade ago. She still called sometimes. He still didn't answer. Not because he didn't love her. Because he did. And love meant letting people meet their own consequences. Even when it hurt. Especially then. We worked in silence. Hands in soil. Making things grow. That evening, my phone buzzed. A photo from Lila. Her old canvas tote. The one from college probably. Faded navy blue. Frayed at the handles. She'd patched the corner with fabric. Neat stitches. Careful work. The text was short. Said she'd fixed it herself. YouTube tutorial. First time she'd sewn anything since home EC. It felt good. Making something work instead of replacing it. I stared at the photo. At the careful stitches. At the evidence of effort. Something warm expanded in my chest. Not quite pride, but close. I texted back. Told her the repair looked professional. She was learning skills that mattered. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, a response. She said I was right. 2 words. No elaboration. But they carried weight. The next week brought the 6-month review. Priya's office again. Same conference room. Same polished table. But different energy. Daniel and Lila arrived on time. Dressed professionally. Lila's hair was simpler. Daniel's face less drawn. They looked like people sleeping through the night. Priya spread out 6 months of statements. January through June. Highlighted sections. Notes in margins. She went through each month methodically. Restaurant spending had stabilized. 200 monthly average. Subscriptions stayed minimal. Debt had decreased by 14,000. Steady. Consistent. No new charges anywhere. Not one. Lila had been promoted. Receptionist to office manager. Real title. Better pay. She'd shown talent for organization. For managing chaos. For staying until the last patient left. Daniel had picked up a freelance client. Side work on weekends. Extra 1,000 monthly. All going to debt. They'd sold the second car. Daniel biked to work now. 7 miles each way. Lost 15 pounds. Felt better than he had in years. Priya looked up from the statements. Said they were in full compliance. Actually exceeding expectations in some areas. She asked if they wanted to continue. Or renegotiate terms. Daniel glanced at Lila. Some silent conversation passed between them. He said they wanted to continue. Exactly as written. The structure helped. Knowing someone was watching. Being accountable. It was working. They didn't want to risk changing it. Lila nodded. Added that the first year had been brutal. Every day felt like punishment. But somewhere around month 4, it shifted. She'd stopped resenting the rules. Started appreciating what they protected. Her marriage. Her mental health. Her actual future instead of the fantasy version. She looked at me directly. Said thank you. The words didn't wobble. Didn't qualify. Just landed solid and true. I didn't know what to say. So I said what was honest. Told her I was proud of them. Both of them. This was hard work. The hardest kind. Changing yourself from the inside out. Daniel's eyes got shiny. He looked away. Cleared his throat. Said he'd been cruel. In the kitchen that day. When he looked away while Lila said I should disappear. He'd been ashamed. Of needing my money. Of not being able to provide. Of failing at being a grown man. But shame wasn't my fault. And punishing me for his feelings was wrong. He was sorry. It took 6 months to say it. But he meant it. The conference room felt smaller. Warmer. Like the walls had moved closer. Priya quietly gathered papers. Gave us space. I told Daniel I'd forgiven him already. Back in December. When I'd stopped waiting for apologies. Started building my own life. Forgiveness wasn't permission to reconnect. It was freedom to move forward. Whether he apologized or not. But hearing it still mattered. So thank you. We sat quietly. The clock ticked. Someone's phone buzzed. Nobody checked it. Finally, Lila spoke. Asked if I'd like to have dinner sometime. Nothing fancy. Their place maybe. She'd cook. Something simple. Just family. I felt the pull. The desire to say yes immediately. To rush back into connection. But I'd learned something. Slow was safer. Boundaries needed testing before trusting. I said maybe. Public place first. Coffee or lunch. Baby steps. She smiled. A real one. Said baby steps were perfect. They'd earned baby steps. We scheduled lunch for the following week. A diner near my community. Neutral ground. 1 hour. Clear beginning and end. They left together. Lila's canvas towed over her shoulder. The patched one. Worn like armor. Or maybe like pride. Priya walked me out. Said they were doing better than 90% of families in similar situations. Most imploded. Or sued each other. Or cut contact forever. This was rare. This slow, painful rebuilding. I asked what made the difference. She thought for a moment. Said probably the fact that I'd let go. Stopped controlling the outcome. Just held the line. And let them choose to meet me there. Or not. That freedom made space for growth. Walking back to my car, February sun broke through clouds. Weak but present. Promising spring eventually. My phone buzzed. Caroline Mercer. Lila's mother. Asking if we could have tea. She'd heard about the review. Wanted to talk. We met Thursday at a cafe downtown. Expensive tea. Tiny sandwiches. The kind of place Caroline belonged. She looked tired but peaceful. Said she almost wired Lila money 4 times. Old habit. Old terror of her daughter struggling. But each time, she remembered our conversation. About daughters learning to swim. About mothers who stopped pretending oceans were puddles. She'd held firm. Let Lila flounder. Then watched her daughter learn to float. Then swim. Then discover she'd been capable all along. Caroline's voice cracked. Said she'd robbed Lila of that discovery. For 39 years. Convinced her she couldn't survive without rescue. I'd given her daughter something Caroline never had. The chance to be strong. We toasted with expensive tea. To daughters who could swim. To mothers who learned to let go. To the painful, necessary distance that sometimes saves families. Walking home, I felt lighter. Not from fixing things, but from releasing the need to fix. From trusting that some things heal themselves. If you give them space. And time. and the hard grace of boundaries. The pond at Riverside Meadows reflected evening sky, pink and orange and fading blue. Ducks settled for the night. Gus was at our bench. I sat down. He offered terrible coffee. I accepted. We didn't talk, just watched the light fade and the stars begin. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Daniel asked to meet on a Wednesday in March. Just him. Not Lila. Not Priya. Father and son. If I was willing. The text came at 7 in the morning. Careful. Formal. Respectful of boundaries. He suggested a diner on Route 9. The one with cracked vinyl booths and perfect pie. Neutral territory. Public. Safe. I texted back yes. Thursday at noon. Then I sat with my coffee. Watched March wind shake the trees outside my window. Wondered what he needed to say. That couldn't be said with Lila present. Or over the phone. Or in Priya's conference room. 8 months had passed since the signing. 8 months of compliance. Of check-ins and statements. Of slow, careful distance. We'd had lunch twice. Coffee once. All public places. All time limited. Progress measured in inches. But this felt different. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully. Not fancy. Just intentional. Jeans. Sweater. The boots Wade had bought me years ago. Still good. Still comfortable. I drove the 20 minutes to the diner. Arrived 10 minutes early. Old habit from library days. Punctuality is respect. The parking lot was half full. Lunch rush starting. I chose a booth by the window. Ordered coffee. Waited. Daniel arrived exactly at noon. Saw me. Waved. Walked over with careful steps. Like approaching something fragile. Or something he'd broken once. He'd lost weight. Face thinner. Body leaner. From biking probably. And stress. And growing up. He slid into the booth across from me. Ordered coffee when the waitress appeared. Black. No sugar. Different from before. Before, it was cream and 2 sugars. Sweet. Easy. Now it was bitter. Adult. We sat quietly for a moment. The diner hummed around us. Conversation. Clinking dishes. The hiss of the grill. Normal life continuing. While ours reconstructed. Daniel wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. The way he used to as a kid. Anchoring himself. He said he'd been thinking. About that day in the kitchen. When Lila said I should disappear. And he looked away. He'd replayed that moment 1,000 times. In his head. In therapy. In the middle of the night. Trying to understand why. Why he'd chosen silence. Why he'd let her say it. Why he'd made me small. To make himself feel less failing. His voice was quiet. Steady but fragile. Like glass holding hot liquid. The waitress came back. Asked if we wanted food. Daniel ordered meatloaf. I ordered the same. And pie for after. Apple. Wade's favorite. When she left, Daniel continued. Said he'd thought I withdrew love. When I withdrew money. That financial support equaled affection. That without my checks, I didn't care. But he'd been wrong. Completely backwards. I'd withdrawn rescue. Not love. I'd stopped enabling so he could start living. The distinction had taken him 8 months to understand. But now he saw it. Clear as daylight. He stared at the pie case across the diner. Row of perfect slices under glass. Cherry. Lemon meringue. Chocolate cream. All the sweetness you could want. If you could afford it. If you'd earned it. He said the word cruel. That's what he'd been. Cruel when he looked away. Cruel in his silence. Cruel in letting me be dismissed. In a house I'd bought. By a woman I'd bankrolled. while he stood by, ashamed of needing me, angry at himself, taking it out on the wrong person. His eyes were wet. He didn't wipe them, just let them shine. I told him I knew. I'd known then, known he was drowning, known he was scared, known he was angry at his own inadequacy. But knowing didn't make it hurt less. The food arrived. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, simple, hot, honest. We ate slowly, not talking, just being in the same space. Without performance, without roles, just two people who shared blood, and history, and damage, and now, maybe, healing. Daniel finished first, pushed his plate aside, asked if I remembered Little League. The detail surprised me, but yes, I remembered. Every Saturday for 3 years. He played right field, never the star, but always showed up. I never missed a game. Rain or shine or weekend exhaustion. He said he remembered that too. How I'd arrive early, sit in the bleachers with my thermos. Cheer for every kid, not just him. The ones who struck out. The ones who dropped catches. The ones whose parents didn't come. After games, I'd ask about his at-bats. What he'd learned, what he'd try differently. Never disappointed, just interested, present. He said somewhere between Little League and adulthood he'd forgotten that. Forgotten I showed up, started taking it for granted, then resenting it, then expecting it, like I owed him my presence, my money, my endless patience. His voice cracked on the last word. He said he'd been wrong. About all of it, and sorry didn't cover it. But sorry was all he had. Outside, March clouds moved fast across the sky. Shadow and light alternating on the parking lot. Nothing staying still, everything shifting. I told him what I'd learned. That I'd been wrong too. Not about the boundaries. Those were right, necessary. But about something else. I'd thought love meant smoothing every path. Removing every obstacle. Making life easy. But that wasn't love. That was fear. Fear of being unwanted, unneeded, unnecessary. I'd bought my place in his life. Instead of trusting I already had one. The silence between us changed quality. Less heavy, more open, like a door swinging wide. Daniel asked if we could start over. Not erase the past, but build something new, something honest. Where he called about recipes instead of emergencies. Where we met because we wanted to. Not because someone needed something. Where I was mom, not ATM. I said yes. But slowly. Trust took time. He nodded. Said slow was all he deserved. Slow was perfect. The waitress brought pie. 2 slices. Ice cream melting on top. We ate in comfortable quiet. Daniel asked about Riverside Meadows. I told him about the pond. About Gus and his terrible coffee. About book club and water aerobics. About growing kale in the community garden. About my small, full life. He listened, really listened, asked questions, laughed at the Gus stories. Said it sounded peaceful, like I'd found something, not what I'd planned, but what I'd needed. I asked about him, about work, about biking, about Lila. He said work was steady. The freelance client had become 2 clients. Extra income helping. Biking had become meditation. Time to think without distractions. And Lila was different. Softer. Stronger. Less frantic. She'd discovered she was good at her job. Actually good. Patients requested her specifically. Doctors relied on her. She was needed for reasons beyond her appearance. Or her charm, or her performance of perfection. For her competence, her reliability, her actual skills. It was changing her. From the inside out. He said their marriage was better now. Harder but better. Real instead of pretty. Honest instead of impressive. They fought about money. About choices. About which mattered and which didn't. But they fought together. Against the problem. Not against each other. For the first time, they were partners. Not performers. The check came. Daniel reached for it. I let him. Small thing. But meaningful. He paid cash. Left a 20% tip. We walked out together. The March air was cold. Sharp. Smelled like coming rain. In the parking lot, we paused. Daniel asked if I'd come to dinner. Their place. In a few weeks maybe. When I was ready. Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti or something. Lila really wanted me there. In their home. As a guest. Not an obligation. I said I'd think about it. He smiled. Said think about it was better than no. We hugged in the parking lot. Brief. Careful. But real. He smelled like laundry detergent and coffee. Not cologne. Not pretense. Just him. Driving back to Riverside Meadows, I thought about distance. How sometimes you have to go far away to find your way back close. How love looks different when it's chosen instead of assumed. Earned instead of expected. The pond was quiet when I got home. No ducks today. Just water reflecting gray sky. Gus wasn't at the bench. I sat anyway. Pulled out my phone. Texted Daniel. Told him yes to dinner. 3 weeks from now. Public place was no longer necessary. Baby steps had become regular steps. His response was immediate. 3 heart emojis. Then a correction. Said Lila told him he was too old for emoji hearts. He didn't care. He was happy. So hearts. I smiled. Put my phone away. Watched the pond ripple in the wind. Everything moving. Nothing staying the same. And that was okay. Better than okay. That was growth. Messy. Painful. Imperfect. But real. And real was the only thing worth having. The only thing that lasted. Inside my apartment, I made tea. Sat in Wade's chair. Told him about lunch. About Daniel's apology. About the dinner invitation. About this strange, hard, beautiful rebuilding. Wade's photo smiled back. Knowing. Patient. Like he'd been waiting for me to arrive here. At this understanding. That love wasn't sacrifice. It was boundaries with open doors. Where people could leave. And choose to return. Not because they needed something. But because they wanted someone. Me. Just me. Finally enough. Rain started. Soft at first. Then steady. Washing everything clean. Making space for spring. And whatever came after. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. The final payment cleared on a Tuesday in April. 18 months after the signing. 18 months of installments and accountability. Now complete. Paid in full. Priya called at 10 in the morning. Her voice carried something I'd rarely heard. Satisfaction. The wire transfer had processed. $78,000. Every penny accounted for. Every term met. The agreement was fulfilled. I sat on my balcony. April sun warming my face. The pond below sparkled with light. New ducks had arrived. A family. 6 ducklings trailing their mother. Learning to paddle. Learning to survive. My phone buzzed again. A photo from Lila. Their kitchen table. Spaghetti in plain white bowls. Steam rising. No wine. No garnish. No performance. Just dinner. The text was simple. Asked if I wanted to come over. Tonight maybe. Nothing fancy. Just them. Just family. I stared at the photo. At the ordinary beauty of it. 3 months had passed since the diner. 3 months of Sunday calls. Of slow, careful rebuilding. I'd been to their house twice. Short visits. Afternoon coffee. The guest room was still storage. But they'd cleared a path. Made space at the table. Asked before assuming. Progress in small gestures. I texted back. Said I'd come. What time? 6:30, she replied. Bring nothing. Just yourself. That afternoon, I walked the pond. 3 loops instead of my usual 2. Energy moving through me. Something completing. Not just the payment. Something larger. A cycle ending. A pattern broken. Margaret waved from her plot in the garden. She'd planted tomatoes last week. Same as Gus. They'd been comparing varieties. Heirloom versus hybrid. The great tomato debate of Riverside Meadows. I checked my kale. Ready to harvest. Dark green. Healthy. I picked enough for a salad. Despite Lila's instructions to bring nothing. Old habits. But this time, the gift came without strings. Without expectations. Just kale. Because I grew it. And wanted to share. At 6:15, I drove to their house. The one I'd helped buy. The one that nearly broke us. The driveway looked the same. But everything felt different. Daniel's bike leaned against the garage. Beat up. Well used. No second car. Just the Honda. And 2 functioning adults. I knocked instead of using the key I no longer had. Lila answered. Hair pulled back. Jeans. Simple shirt. No makeup. Or maybe just less. She looked younger somehow. Lighter. She hugged me at the door. Brief but warm. Took the kale with genuine pleasure. Said she'd been wanting to try cooking with it. The house smelled like garlic and tomato sauce. Real cooking smells. Not takeout. Not delivery. Actual food being made. Daniel emerged from the kitchen. Wooden spoon in hand. Apron splattered with sauce. He grinned. Said the sauce was from scratch. Wade's recipe. The one I'd texted him last month. He'd been practicing. Tonight was the real test. The kitchen was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was bigger. More present. Taking up space I'd earned. Lila set the table. Mismatched plates. Thrift store finds probably. Nothing matched. Everything worked. She'd made salad. Daniel plated pasta. We sat together. No fancy centerpiece. No crystal. No performance. Just food and family. Daniel raised his water glass. Said he wanted to make a toast. To endings that were really beginnings. To mothers who loved enough to let go. To learning the difference between helping and enabling. To second chances, earned slowly. His voice caught on the last words. Lila reached for his hand. Squeezed. We touched glasses. The sound rang clear. The pasta was good. Actually good. Wade would have approved. We ate and talked. About normal things. Lila's promotion to senior office manager. Daniel's 3rd freelance client. The garden at Riverside Meadows. Gus and his tomato obsession. Book club's latest selection. Life without crisis. Without emergency. Without drama. Just the ordinary miracle of functioning. After dinner, Daniel brought out dessert. Store-bought pie. Not homemade. But he'd remembered it was Wednesday. Pie night at the diner. Our new tradition. Small detail. Big meaning. He'd been paying attention. Lila cleared plates. Brought coffee. The cheap kind. Not the fancy beans she used to insist on. But it was hot. And she'd made it. And that mattered more. She sat back down. Folded her hands on the table. Said she needed to say something. Her voice was steady. But vulnerable. She said she'd been awful. Not just that day in the kitchen. But for 3 years before it. She'd treated me like a resource, not a person, like an ATM with a pulse. She'd taken and taken, then resented what she took. Because taking made her feel small. So she'd made me smaller. To balance it out, the cruelty had been deliberate. Even if unconscious, she'd wanted me to disappear. Because my presence reminded her of her failure, of her dependency, of her inability to function. She'd blamed me for her shame. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't look away. Said she understood now, that I hadn't ruined the wedding. I'd saved the marriage, by refusing to enable the fantasy, by forcing them to face reality, by loving them enough to let them struggle. The kitchen was quiet, just the hum of the refrigerator, and breathing, and the weight of truth. I told her I'd forgiven her. Months ago, before she asked, before she changed. Forgiveness wasn't conditional. It was freedom, for both of us. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, or pretending. It meant acknowledging, then choosing to move forward anyway. She nodded, wiped her eyes, said she didn't deserve it. But she was grateful. Daniel stood, went to the counter, came back with an envelope. Plain, white. He slid it across the table. Said they'd written something. For me. When I was ready, I opened it carefully. Inside was a card. Homemade. Construction paper folded. Crayon drawing on the front. A house. A sun. 3 stick figures. Like a child would draw. Inside, their handwriting. Daniel's blocky print. Lila's careful cursive. They'd written gratitude. Not for the money. For the boundary. For the hardness. For the gift of struggle. For teaching them they could survive. Without rescue. Without cushioning. Without someone else paying their way. They were stronger now. Married for real. Not just on paper. Partners in the actual sense. And they had me to thank. Even though it hadn't felt like kindness. Even though it still hurt sometimes. It was the most loving thing anyone had done. The card also held something else. A photo. Lila's canvas tote. The patched one. She'd kept using it, even after she could afford new. Because it reminded her of fixing instead of replacing. Of making do. Of being resourceful. Of being enough. I held the card carefully. This homemade offering. More valuable than anything they'd bought me. When money flowed freely. When I was the emergency fund. This cost them nothing. And everything. After coffee, I helped wash dishes. Lila washed. I dried. Daniel put away. A rhythm forming. Easy. Natural. Like we'd done this forever. Like we'd do it again. At the door, Daniel hugged me long. Said he loved me. Not the obligatory kind. The real kind. The hard-won kind. Lila hugged me too. Whispered thank you again. I drove home slowly. April evening turning to dusk. The sky painted purple and pink. At Riverside Meadows, the pond reflected fading light. Gus sat at our bench. I joined him. He offered coffee. I accepted. It was still terrible. We sat in comfortable silence. Watching ducks settle. Watching stars emerge. He asked how dinner was. I said good. Really good. He nodded. Said healing looked different than people expected. Quieter. Slower. Less dramatic. But more permanent. We finished our coffee. Said good night. In my apartment, I made tea. Sat in Wade's chair. Pulled out his photo. The one that had traveled with me. From the Victorian to the rental. From the hotel to here. Always with me. I told him we'd made it. Not back to where we were. But forward to somewhere new. Where I was enough. Without proving it. Without buying it. Just existing. Taking up space. Mattering. I set his photo on the windowsill. Not hidden anymore, but present, watching over this life I'd built. From ashes, from boundaries, from the courage to say no. Outside, the community was settling. Lights in windows, people in their small, earned spaces, living their imperfect, real lives. I thought about the journey. From that kitchen insult to this moment. From betrayal to rebuilding. From enabling to empowering. The path had been brutal. Lonely, uncertain, but necessary. Sometimes the kindest gift wasn't more help. It was the space for people to meet their own weight. To discover their own strength. To learn they could survive. Without rescue. Without cushioning. Just themselves. And sometimes the kindest gift to yourself was the same thing. Space to matter. Permission to choose. Freedom to leave. And the grace to return. When ready. When real. When earned. I finished my tea. Turned off the lights. Went to bed in my apartment. In my community. In my life. Finally mine. Finally whole. Finally free. The pond outside held the moon. Perfect reflection. Everything still. Everything balanced. Everything exactly as it should be. Not because it was easy. But because it was real. And real was the only place. Where love could grow. Where family could heal. Where a 68-year-old widow could find herself. And discover she'd been worth finding. All along.